Salam alaikum, everyone, and good morning to those in the eastern region of the United States. Good afternoon to those who are half a world away, and good evening to those who are listening in after sundown in their country. We're focusing today on an international crisis of the heart, a cry from the heart, in terms of humanitarian dynamic and component and segment of the world's relationship with Yemen, a troubled country, but a resilient people. Yemen is in the midst of its fourth civil war, first since the late 1940s, then 1962 to 1970, 1994, and then now since 2014. One of the reasons the country is as resilient as it is because of its vibrant civil society organizations linked with international civil society organizations. I've been privileged to have been the only American official observer for all four of Yemen's first presidential and parliamentary elections. This year marks the 52nd year of my visiting Yemen on a regular basis, 25 separate times, meeting with the president before, Ali Abdullah Saleh 9 times, meeting with every foreign minister since the 1960s. So this is my frame of reference, in addition to being the president, founding CEO of the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations. And what we hope to do in this hour is to have a conversation between and amongst individuals who are specialized in Yemen, and especially the challenge of bringing about a meaningful, enduring, comprehensive ceasefire, including the Houthis, and actually focusing on three seemingly disparate groups. There are the Houthis, originally from northwestern Yemen, still from there, but they've expanded their territorial reach far beyond what their original political demands have been. There's Lebanon's Hezbollah that is involved in assisting the Houthis. There's an Iranian dynamic involved here. There is the Riyadh aspect to the internationally recognized government of President Al-Hadi. That's one group. And the second one has to do with the Southern Transitional Council, which is a secessionist movement backed by Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates. And thirdly, not to lose sight of the Al-Qaeda presence. This is what brought the United States to focus on Yemen in the first place with regard to intervention under the umbrella of counterterrorism cooperation. So few countries could be more complex than Yemen in an effort to comprehend this. And what we'll do is focus on the players from an empathetic point of view in terms of their legitimate needs, legitimate concerns, legitimate interests, legitimate goals, and in the process increase their hard to come by information, insight, knowledge, understanding, and the ability to dig deeper analytically on the primary issues and challenges at hand. When you have a situation where there are reports that a child in Yemen dies from malnutrition every 70 seconds, one can hardly have another issue as compelling, as timely, as urgent, as relevant as the humanitarian dynamic of Yemen. We have Abdulaziz Al-Anjeri as the co-sponsor of this event. He's the founding CEO of Reconnaissance Research, a prominent public policy institute in Kuwait, as we are here in the United States. After his welcoming remarks, we'll turn to a special envoy, the President Biden's special envoy, Timothy Lenderking, since February the 4th. He's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Arabian Peninsula Affairs and former Deputy Chief of Mission to the Ambassador to the Embassy of the United States in Riyadh. And then we have Sarah Charles, who has been extensively and intensively involved in refugee and humanitarian issues, especially now with the United States Agency for International Development. And after Ms. Charles, we have David Gressly, the United Nations resident coordinator for efforts to try to bring about a ceasefire and certainly the stabilization of Yemen, without which the Yemeni people have no prospect to anticipate, to prepare, to plan for the present, let alone the future. I turn the floor over to Abdulaziz Al-Anjeri.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. It's an honor to have the opportunity to partner with the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations again. And the Council have brought many decades of knowledge and understanding to the world about the Arab region. And we have to be very grateful for your sincere efforts throughout the years. And thank you as well for the efforts you will continue to do. We thank also retired United States Colonel Abbas Dahouk for being the moderator for today's program. On behalf of Reconnaissance Research and Kuwait, good day to all of our viewers from all parts of the world. It is a privilege to co-host along with the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations, the United States Special Envoy to Yemen, Mr. Tim Lenderking, USAID Assistant to the Administrator, Sarah Charles, and UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in Yemen, David Gressly. Reconnaissance Research was established in 2019 as an independent policy institute. It's a platform to allow the share of ideas and also a bridge to connect people to people, government to government, and vice versa. At Reconnaissance Research, we are dedicated to strengthening Kuwait's role as a constructive international mediator, and we are committed to bringing people together to engage in dialogues about some of the world's most pressing issues, just like the issue we will be discussing today. The continuing challenges in enhancing Yemen's own security and stability are not lost on anyone here today. His Highness the late Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah, the current Emir, His Highness Sheikh Nawaf Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sheikh Dr. Ahmed Nasser Mohammed Al-Sabah, have all made clear that they are steadfast in working to reduce violence and the humanitarian suffering facing the Yemeni people. Kuwait remains dedicated as a partner in the pursuit of a peaceful resolution to the Yemen crisis. All countries, including Kuwait, are waiting to see what the United States Special Envoy for Yemen, Mr. Tim Lenderking, a proven, experienced, and trusted diplomat, can do to assist Yemen and the Yemeni people. Yemen is a special place for all Arabs. As history proves, many Arabs hail and trace their roots back to Yemen. We hope that Mr. Tim's efforts in coordination with the United Nations can resolve this conflict and lead to a peaceful and diplomatic solution. We all know that the multiple armed conflicts have resulted in one of the world's worst humanitarian crises in recent history. This bloody conflict has claimed the lives of innocent civilians and displaced millions of Yemeni people in one of the world's already poorest countries around. The wounds suffered by the grieving Yemeni people are great, and the bleeding is still continuing. There needs to be a Yemeni reconciliation, and it will take real leadership and courage to support that from all concerned parts of the world. With that, I thank you and thank Dr. John Duke Anthony again for his efforts. And I thank Mr. Lenderking, Ms. Charles, and Mr. Gressly for speaking with us today. Colonel Abbas.
Thank you, Abdulaziz, for your remarks, and thank you, Dr. Anthony, for introducing us today. Good day to all our listeners here abroad, and welcome to our conversation today on the humanitarian crisis in Yemen with our special speakers who are undoubtedly, they understand all about diplomacy and aid very well, especially when it comes to Yemen. As Dr. Anthony mentioned, Yemen is a complex country. It is indeed complex, and it's been at war for a long time, and it's becoming a regional issue and also an international issue. But if you look around in the region, there's another country was like Yemen. It's been doing that for the last 20 years, Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, we witness today that the Afghan government, the Taliban, who's opposition to the government, and also the Afghan people are sitting together to identify how they go forward themselves. And I'm hoping that that will be the same thing, and they end up, they agree on a ceasefire and go to the table. And with that, I'm looking forward to hear to our speakers all about diplomacy and aid. And let's start with our special envoy to Yemen, Mr. Lenderking. Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Abbas. It's great to be with you, and John Duke, it's always a pleasure. Abdulaziz, great to see you again. Special thanks to the National Council for organizing this event. And it's also an honor to serve on a panel with two great colleagues, Sarah Charles and David Gressly, who I regard as true humanitarians as well. And when Dr. John Duke talks about a cause of the heart, I think that we really approach it that way. And I believe that the Biden administration approaches it that way as well. When I was announced as the new special envoy, the president asked me really to do two things, to engage on two tracks. And one is the humanitarian track, which I think we'll talk about extensively today. And the other is a political track to advance a durable solution to the Yemen conflict. And I think the dual mandate reflects the U.S. commitment to understanding the humanitarian crisis facing Yemenis, as well as our understanding that the humanitarian crisis and the war are connected. And here's a key point, I think, that as long as the war continues, the humanitarian crisis will continue to worsen. And at the same time, the increasing economic stability will likely fuel further conflict. So we have a real need, I think, to address both of these tracks at the same time, but not let one wait on the other. I think our audience probably knows that the roots of the crisis are deep. It's been years of instability and weak governance in Yemen. It's led to the erosion of basic services and a troubled economy. And the disruption of a peaceful political transition and the outbreak of war almost 7 years ago have greatly accelerated this trend. So as we've witnessed the destruction coming from the war and the instability, we've witnessed persistent challenges to the free flow of aid, goods, and people throughout the conflict, for which all parties bear responsibility. There aren't any easy solutions to address the humanitarian crisis. Obviously, we're going to talk more about the need of donors to do more, but we should be wary of those who do suggest that there are easy solutions. What I've seen is these are often just the latest attempts by conflict actors to weaponize the humanitarian situation. And so really, from where I stand, I think the United States also, the only way to durably address persistent constraints to the flow of goods, aid, and people is to stop the fighting. And the only way to begin addressing the root causes of the humanitarian crisis is to reach a political solution to the conflict. That is why the United States continues to urge, and why I do so again today, the need for a comprehensive nationwide ceasefire and swift transition to political talks. I would say that despite an unprecedented international and regional consensus on the need to resolve the conflict, and I have spent considerable time on the road during my appointment in February, visiting all of the countries in the region, talking to the Yemeni actors inside and outside of Yemen, talking to the regional governments. And I do say, and I think this is cause for hope, that there is a stronger international consensus to end the conflict than there has been over the course of the last 6 years. What we haven't seen is a full commitment to engage directly and urgently on the ceasefire. And I think that one of the areas that we've continued to point out is the offensive in Marib that is being launched and conducted by the Houthis, which appears to have a singular focus and is a particularly problematic issue. And that is because Marib, as you know, is a refuge and a safe haven for many Yemenis who have fled other parts of the country. There are 1 million displaced people already in Marib. And so when we talk about the fighting in Yemen, we can see immediately the case of Marib, where continued fighting and a continued offensive by the Houthis will have very negative consequences for an already very stretched humanitarian infrastructure. Also on the positive side, I'm glad to see that there's engagement again on the Riyadh agreement, which is the effort, as John Duke mentioned, to bring the South into greater stability, and that will improve basic services for Yemenis. We think that as this Riyadh agreement goes forward, it will create more opportunities for the Yemen government to return to Aden, and indeed for the provision of basic services, all the basic elements of infrastructure in the South to go forward. And so we have, I think as Sarah will articulate here, a very dire humanitarian situation that is exacerbated by the onset of COVID as well. And we need to continue to bring life-saving assistance to more than 10 million Yemenis on a regular basis, despite all of the constraints. Not only is the humanitarian response preventing untold suffering, it is helping to preserve a basis for Yemen's recovery. And so the US continues to welcome efforts by the international community to build on humanitarian assistance with additional efforts to prevent the collapse of institutions. Let me close by just suggesting 3 areas where the international community can do more to bolster these critical efforts. First, the international community, particularly regional actors, must increase humanitarian funding, including by following through on more than $200 million in pledges from the March 1st Donors Conference. The Yemen humanitarian response is currently funded at 43%. That's just not enough for the kind of needs that we are seeing out there. And if there aren't additional contributions in the next few months, we will see programs close down or have to decrease in scope. Second, the international community must continue to push the Houthis to stop the offensive in Marib and to engage in a comprehensive nationwide ceasefire. The Houthis don't own the set of violence alone. Obviously, the Saudi-led coalition has borne its share of responsibilities as well. But the fact is that the Houthis are not winning in Marib. It is a stalemated conflict, and the continued fighting there is putting millions of vulnerable people at increased risk and risking further displacement. And finally, the Republic of Yemen government, Saudi Arabia, and the Houthis must take action to address the fuel shortages in northern Yemen. Fuel imports via the port of Hodeidah are only 1/3 of what they were last year during the same period. While commercial and humanitarian food and other commodities continue to flow through Hodeidah, increased oil fuel prices are driving up the cost of these goods as well as basic services, putting them out of reach of many Yemenis. So we applaud UN efforts to reach agreement between the Houthis and Yemen government on a mechanism to regularize the flow of fuel and ensure that tax revenues from fuel imports are used to pay civilian salaries. That's a key issue. But we need to continue to bear down on that particular problem. We also urge the Houthis to avoid stockpiling and manipulating fuel prices, which we fear has kept prices artificially high, even as fuel has arrived through Hodeidah and overland from southern ports. The humanitarian and economic crisis in Yemen is staggering, but these three steps will significantly mitigate Yemeni suffering and put us on a firmer path toward peace. With that, that concludes my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
A very, heavy plan to work with, especially the humanitarian piece of it, while military operations ongoing almost everywhere. So it is a daunting task on the diplomatic side, and of course also is even more complex part on the humanitarian. With that, I will turn the mic to Ms. Sarah Charles to tell us about the humanitarian aid.
Thank you, Abbas, and thank you, Dr. John Duke and Abdulaziz, for inviting me here today. And thank you to my fellow panelists. I really could not ask for a better team to be working on these very complicated issues. As Tim said, addressing the suffering of the Yemeni people really has been central to the Biden policy from the beginning towards Yemen, and I'm really grateful for Tim's partnership and, of course, for David's work on the ground in Yemen. On a personal note, as some of you who participated in an event a couple of months ago know, I first traveled to work in Yemen 11 years ago, and this beautiful country and its people are very near and dear to my heart. As you've just heard from Tim, the US is gravely concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, which remains one of the worst in the world. And as this group well knows, 2/3 of the country's population is now in need of humanitarian assistance. That's more than 20 million Yemenis who struggle every day to survive without basic necessities, including more than 2 million young children facing deadly malnutrition this year. Over the course of this conflict, now entering the 7th year, we've seen families uprooted over and over again as conflict lines shift, made more vulnerable each time they're forced to flee. We're seeing this most acutely now in Marib, as Tim mentioned, where the Houthis' latest offensive is killing civilians and threatens to displace hundreds of thousands of more people. After years of conflict and growing poverty, Yemen is already in a precarious situation. While aid from the international community has so far prevented vulnerable populations from slipping into famine, this recent escalation of violence is only increasing humanitarian need and placing further strain on an already stretched humanitarian operation. Our brave partners are urgently scaling up assistance in Marib despite very significant challenges affecting the community. With USAID support, the humanitarian community provided emergency aid, including shelter, health, safe water, hygiene supplies, and cash to nearly 14,000 families who have been forced to flee this fighting since January. But it remains extremely dangerous and logistically difficult for aid workers to travel to Marib. And the Houthis' indiscriminate attacks on civilian populations puts our partners' brave staff on the ground, who are almost all Yemeni, in constant danger. We're also hearing reports of humanitarians in Marib being detained and harassed by security forces, putting them in even more risk and further hampering the urgently needed scale-up of assistance. Unfortunately, these challenges are not confined to Marib. Throughout Yemen, access to populations in need continues to hinder the international community's humanitarian operation. Insecurity and deliberate obstruction by authorities prevent us from delivering aid at a scale needed to address the growing need. With our humanitarian partners and other donors, we continue to advocate for the Houthis and the authorities in the south to enable unimpeded humanitarian access to people in need across the entire country. Humanitarian assistance is vital to saving lives and reducing suffering, but only if it reaches those who need it most. It is also true that aid alone cannot meet humanitarian needs. Both humanitarian supplies and commercial imports, especially food, fuel, and medicine, must be allowed to flow freely, through all entry points throughout the country without delay. As we have said before, prolonged disruptions to food imports into northern Yemen would increase the risk of famine for thousands, if not millions of people. As Special Envoy Lenderking just discussed, fuel shortages in northern Yemen in particular are making humanitarian crises even worse. In recent months, restrictions on fuel imports into Hodeidah port and high fuel prices have caused delays of urgent humanitarian activities across northern Yemen. While we welcome recent progress in allowing some fuel ships to enter Hodeidah, we must reach a longer-term solution for regular, uninterrupted fuel importation and distribution. Commercial and humanitarian food and other commodities have continued to flow through Hodeidah port with few problems over the last few months. But without the fuel, these commodities cannot be processed or delivered to the communities that need them most. Fuel shortages are also hindering the delivery and access to healthcare and other critical services. It's essential that fuel be available and accessible consistently in country. We also must see an end to the hoarding and manipulation of fuel markets that continue to pose a major challenge even after fuel is imported. And we will continue to work with Special Envoy Lenderking, UN Resident Coordinator Gressly, our partners and other donors to continue advocating for solutions to these challenges. At the same time, we will continue to do everything we can to reach Yemen's most vulnerable populations with the aid that they rely on to survive. Through our UN and NGO partners, we're responding to urgent needs throughout the entire country, providing food assistance, working to prevent and treat malnutrition, distributing basic necessities such as hygiene and shelter supplies to recently displaced families, rehabilitating water tanks and pipes so communities have safe water, and helping parents earn an income and rebuild their livelihoods. Every month, food provided by the United States reaches 8.5 million vulnerable Yemenis. We're also supporting efforts to combat COVID-19, including by supporting health centers where vaccines provided by the US-funded COVAX initiative are administered. And additionally, USAID supports UN humanitarian air services, which are critical components of COVID-19 response, providing air transport in and out of the country for aid workers and transporting critical medical supplies to Yemen. Just as the Red Sea ports are critical infrastructure, so too is the Sana'a airport for the entire humanitarian structure inside the country, and it's crucial to use these in-house flights and crucial that they can continue to operate there. We have consistently been one of the largest donors to the humanitarian response. This year, the US has already provided $350 million, and we expect to announce more assistance in the coming months and continue to prioritize preventing famine and addressing other critical needs. But we can't do this alone. While we commend the generous pledges made by other donors so far this year, the fact is that more funding is required to address growing needs. We continue to urgently call on donors to fulfill their pledges from the March 1st Pledging Conference quickly, so funding they have promised can get into the hands of UN and NGO organizations working on the ground, and critically get supplies to those who need it the most. We also urge those donors who have not yet stepped up to do so. But as we work to meet urgent needs, we also recognize that humanitarian assistance cannot solve the root causes of this crisis. As you just heard Special Envoy Lenderking reiterate, there must be a political solution to this conflict to end the people of Yemen's suffering. USAID is working urgently with our colleagues at the State Department to support the US dual-track approach to the crisis that Special Envoy Lenderking just outlined. And together, we're committed to bringing peace, prosperity, and security to Yemen. With that, I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Indeed, it is a aid and also tell the story of outside Yemen to motivate outsiders and goodwill people to donate to the cause of Yemen. Thanks for your remark. Now we go, Mr. David. I look at David as the humanitarian aid commander on the ground. I mean, he's not performing combat operation, but he's out there to save lives and distribute humanitarian aid evenly to obviously people under the Houthi control and under the government control, and try to find ways. Thank you for as well. This is a tough task to do it, especially under fire. This is one of the few places in the world where you have combat operations ongoing. At the same time, you have USAID or UN try to also infuse humanitarian simultaneously aid during conflict. So with that, I look forward to your observations from the ground up. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this extremely important subject. I've just recently arrived in March, so I don't have the decades of experience that some of you do, but this is an incredible country that doesn't deserve the crises that it's going through. It's been repeated many times that this war has been going on 6-7 years now. It's a fourth war. This is getting to be too much, frankly. There is no substitute for peace. And before I get into my presentation, I just want to applaud the U.S. government for its efforts on both the search for peace, which is not going to be simple or straightforward, but also for the humanitarian track and the tremendous support that we're seeing coming to the partners on the ground for the people of Yemen. And thank you very much for that continued push. And I think today's meeting is another example of that larger commitment. I view the war, it's a cause, in my view, of three crises, and I want to speak about them. Humanitarian crisis, which we've talked about quite extensively, but also a protection crisis and an economic crisis. Let me just highlight the elements of those three, because I think we need to work simultaneously on all three aspects. We do consider this, it's not just me, but our colleagues in the United Nations, the worst humanitarian crisis currently facing any country in the world at this time. We're speaking of 2/3 of the population, 20 million people in need of assistance, 16 million in acute food insecurity, 2.3 million children malnourished, facing acute malnutrition. Dr. Anthony mentioned something about one child dying every minute, roughly every minute. That's not acceptable. 82% of the districts in the country have very limited to non-existent health services, and in general, basic services are in the process of collapsing and are at severe risk of not being able to continue to provide even the most minimal services. There's a protection crisis. In the country, about 1 out of 6 districts are actually on the front line, and that number of districts that are on the front line of the fight continues to grow year to year. So 51 districts as we speak today, 4 million people displaced, considerable civilian casualties. Last month was the worst month in several years, in fact, in a number of civilian casualties, in large part to the fight that's taking place in Marib, that Special Envoy, Mr. Lenderking, spoke about a few moments ago. But there are also continued issues of landmines, unexploded ordnance, IEDs. I read reports almost every day of a child or children or families injured, killed by these devices. This is a serious protection issue. As in many crises, those who are most at risk are the most marginalized communities, minorities, women, disabled, and we have to have a special focus on that, those groups of individuals as well. And we're trying to keep a close focus on that as we go forward. And as is known, Yemen is a major transit center for migrants, particularly those going into Saudi Arabia. And that's actually a significant part of the protection problem that we face in the country. The third crisis, the economic crisis, contributes significantly to both of the other two. The economy has collapsed by about 50% since the beginning of the war. It was the poorest country in the region before the war started. So you can imagine what 50% reduction in the economy means. It means the collapse of incomes. Businesses don't function. Therefore increasing unemployment. Government personnel don't get paid. The salaries don't come. The incomes are lost. You find the same thing in terms of IDPs who no longer have employment. There's significant loss of purchasing power, and this is a major problem of food insecurity, is the means to buy food just is not there. The issue of fuel restrictions plays into all of this as well. The fuel literally fuels business. It fuels our humanitarian response. And we need to make sure that we minimize the impact of the crisis. The intervention to restart some of the vessels coming in with fuel is very real in the impact. We see flour mills being able to produce flour from imported WFP grain. We see, most recently I had a visit from the head of the cement factory, which is outside of Amran, just outside of Sana'a, who came in to thank us for the push to get fuel oil in for his factory, which allowed him to restart and re-employ several thousand people. And as I've described to many, it has a knock-on impact. The business that restarted not only employs people, they employ people to transport the product, cement. Several thousand people involved in the distribution, people involved in construction get their job back. We were talking tens of thousands of people, maybe 20, 30,000 people who have an income now because of that fuel arrival. And you multiply that times 5 people in a household, you're talking 150,000 people that now are in a better position from a food security point of view, as well as overall purchasing power. So the collapse of income is a critical issue. The cost of food, the conflict has driven up the cost of food, some food assistance, much of it commercial. War risk insurance adds about $200 million a year to the cost of food coming in. Restrictions of movement add to the transport cost. The verification system, which we believe can be simplified, adds to that cost. And if you look at all of these costs, we're talking about $500 million in additional costs for importation of food, which could rather be used for increasing the purchasing power by reducing the cost of food. And finally, the stability of the economy. This has been mentioned before. The rapid devaluation of the Riyadh, the currency instability, also reduces purchasing power. So we need to find ways of, even in the course of a conflict, to deal with these 3 crises. And what do we specifically need in those areas? As was already mentioned, 43% of our $3.8 billion plan has been funded and received, which is a start, but it's only a start. We have a $2.1 billion gap. We are afraid if we don't receive additional funding by this summer, July, August, and that's at our doorstep as I speak, many activities will have to stop. There was a good approach on the food security side to scale up over last year. And I want to talk about last year, actually, because of the reduction of assistance last year. The full food requirements of those in need was not met or even close to being met. The rations were cut in half. And what that does over time is it exacerbates the food insecurity of the population because they're not getting enough. So we're not even maintaining them at the level that they were at previously, but there's a degradation. So we started out this year with a deficit. Now with a surge of funding that came in, it allowed us to scale up at least to 100% for those at risk of famine, and 3/4 of those on the doorstep of famine. And that has had a positive impact, but we're not yet with the funding to sustain that. And we could simply compound the problem that happened last year if that assistance does not come in. So the funding gap needs to be filled. And it's not just food or not just nutrition, it's health, it's education. We can't afford the loss of another generation without education, protection, shelter. I'll speak about IDPs in a second, but we don't really have the funds to fully support the magnitude of the crisis. So funding is a critical need. Access has been mentioned. This is one thing that we really want to push extremely hard this year, is to maximize our access. I'm happy that we were able to go into Marv very early. I went in myself in early March to try to establish an air corridor there, which is now functional. and has allowed a scale up of work on the ground through contributions coming in from member states, also our SURF funding. And I think that's good, but I'm not satisfied with that either. We're just completed a security assessment along the West Coast, going from Aden all the way up to the border front line in Hodeidah, the south side of that front line. There are communities there that have not been reached in 2 years. We need to reach those communities. Next month, early next month in July, I hope to see a security assessment going into the Al-Jaf Governorate, which is north of Marib. We don't talk about it very much, but it's been equally affected by the same Marib offensive. We have many IDPs that are not being served right now. We need better access. We're going to find that access and act there. Likewise, with the two authorities, we run into constant restrictions. It's complicated. I'm not going to describe it, but I will just simply say that this is a constant negotiation that's required constant engagement. And we will carry out that engagement, and we will tackle each of these things as they come in order to maximize the access. But the consequence of these restrictions, we have 16.5 million people who are in areas where there are restrictions. Of those, we have about 6 million that we have real difficulty getting to. So that's the core group that we really need to focus on, and we will continue to work in that direction. We also want to improve the quality of our assessments of the situation. We want to give member states, donors, accurate information of what the situation is on the ground. We've gone a long ways to harmonize our approach and get agreements to have the freedom to move to those areas to properly assess. So those are some immediate objectives. On the protection side, the quality of support of IDPs, I think we need a serious look. I was in Sada, and I was in Hajj just this last week, spent 4 days on the ground with the humanitarian actors, but also, of course, with authorities, both Sana-based as well as from the two governorates. I can tell you this is a serious situation, the quality of support we're providing to IDPs. We need to recognize these are long-term displacements, not short-term. We need to find real solutions for them that provide a level of dignity for them, because they're not in a dignified situation right now, including employment and employment opportunities. So we'll work on that. The support to the marginalized, that has been a major focus of our Yemen pooled fund to really focus on those communities that have been forgotten. We need to reach out to them, and we need to hear from our beneficiaries how we're doing, how we're working, so that we do better. Migrants, when I was in Sada, I continued north towards the Saudi border, and I witnessed the large number of migrants that are passing through. Significant burden in country. We need to work, I think, very proactively on those who are at most risk. I was in a hospital. One of the hospitals I visited had both Yemeni as well as non-Yemeni migrants. They were there because they were injured, shot in some cases. Some cases they were injured through falls, trying to find ways to the Saudi border. The stories I hear about their journey is actually quite horrifying. We know that there was a ship that was bringing migrants that capsized. Perhaps hundreds, 200-300 people may have perished. We don't know the number. These things are a regular occurrence. And so, and even in Sada, there's over 2,000 migrant prisoners there that we need to assess and see where we can help support those in those conditions. We need to work with the parties in conflict to reduce civilian casualties. We can't continue to see each month reported more casualties than we've had before. It's extremely important. For that, we need attribution for what happened and engagement with the parties to demand that changes be taken in the nature of the conflict, how they carry out their tactics on the ground and in the air. I mentioned mine action. We need greater access for supporting mine action. I think it's intolerable that 4 days out of 7, 5 days out of 7, someone is injured or killed in Yemen because of that. The third area, economy. Now, this is where I want to take the UN in an expanded direction. We have to sustain our work on humanitarian. We need to really scale up on protection, but I would like to see an economic approach as well. Because I think we can work on the food security issue from both angles, direct humanitarian assistance, but look at the economy and see, even in the course of a conflict, what we can do to increase income, issues of salaries, issues of sustaining businesses, public works kinds of initiatives, direct support for employment for IDPs and refugees, supporting marginal groups in terms of their productivity to produce an income for their own lives. These are issues that we can work on. Cost of food coming in. I mentioned the three major elements. I won't go over that again, but I think collectively, we can find solutions to that. And the stability of the economy and the stability of the purchasing power is important. Increase income, decrease costs, stabilize, and I think we can reduce the need for humanitarian assistance even in this situation. And I want to finish very quickly. Since I'm speaking to a largely American audience, I believe, I was born and raised in Missouri. So as you know, it's a show me state. So for the moment, I'm going to have to assume the conflict will continue until I'm shown otherwise. But we need to have a contingency plan for peace at the same time. When peace opportunities come, we need to be in a position to seize them. When the ceasefire comes, we need to be ready to support in these three areas. What are the additional things that can be done in a ceasefire that can't be done in a conflict? This is why I'm working with the Special Envoys team to see how we can incorporate this into the negotiations on ceasefire. Likewise, with a final settlement, we need to be ready for that. And the discussions need to be well informed in terms of the negotiations so that the peace dividends, assuming we get to that point, come quickly to solidify peace and not be delayed. I've been in too many environments where these things have been long delayed and threaten the very agreements that have been so difficult to achieve. So I will conclude. We need to work on the three crises of humanitarian protection and economy. We need to do it in the context of conflict today, hopefully a ceasefire tomorrow, and ultimately a final political settlement so that we can help Yemen return back to the kind of prosperity its citizens are looking for, the kind of stability for their families that they're looking for, and we can only do that through peace. So thank you very much for your support, more importantly, your engagement in the region and around the world for peace in Yemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. It is a daunting task indeed. I just hope you find Yemeni partners on the ground to be as enthusiastic as you to put your plan into action and accomplish these three goals you are strive here. I know I don't have a lot of time here to ask most of them, but I have to start with the COVID-19 because this is a question of importance to everyone everywhere. And we did mention a little bit, but we do hear reports from the human rights that and the Houthis are stopping the information about the benefit of the vaccines and so on. So what is the status of vaccination, for example? Is there enough vaccination in Yemen? And is there a plan from the United States to send to them? And how do you do it if under the areas of conflict? I understand it's hard to do, but what about the areas that outside the conflict, areas under the government of Yemen? We do hear about Yemen as a monolithic entity, but there's a lot of pockets that we can do perhaps more than others. The other quick question too on Marib. I know Tim talks a lot about Marib, about the importance of Marib, importance of ceasefire and all that. But for us here from the Washington outside Yemen, could you just tell us, say, if Marib fell, the government of Yemen will fall as well. So just to give us a little more info on this briefly, why Marib is important in the conflict of Yemen. Whoever wants to respond to that.
Did you want me to respond on the first one, or?
No, I mean, however, that's open. Sorry, open questions to everybody. Whoever feels wants to respond to it on the COVID-19 and Marib. I think Yemen, maybe Tim will talk about Marib a bit, and then COVID-19, Sarah or David, you choose.
Well, let me just jump in on COVID-19. I can start on that just to move it forward. I think one of the realities, the most important reality for Yemen in terms of COVID and vaccination is there's not enough vaccine, regardless of access. We only have 360,000 doses that have arrived through the COVAX program. We expect another tranche of about 360, but in a population of 30 million, that's nothing. We also face a lot of hesitancy here. Even if we had more, I'm not sure what percentage of the population would accept it. So we do have, but to answer your specific question, yes, there are restrictions in the distribution of the vaccine here in the SANA-controlled areas. They have allowed us to proceed with 10,000 vaccination of health workers at least. So that was at least a start to get into this. But for the population at large, there is no mass campaign. It's not a question of access. It's a question of getting the authorization to allow that to happen. So that is a piece of work we're still working on. But in the South, we do have the ability to access populations and quickly utilizing that. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be enough. And we're going to have to continue. The most important thing in both cases is that we're going to have to continue the mitigating measures that we've been doing for the last year because we really have no choice. And it's going to take, even by the end of the year, we're not going to have a very high percentage of the population either side vaccinated. So the mitigating measures are critical as we go forward. And it's complicated by all the other diseases that come as a result of this,
thank you. That's
this conflict. Thank you.
I can jump in very quickly. I know you're short on time, but just to add, we're obviously supporting David, the UN and other partners work to mitigate the impacts of COVID. I think we also recognize what David flagged, which is we have supply issues to make COVAX viable, and it's why the U.S. government is not only supporting COVAX with funding, but actually President Biden announced at the G7 just a couple of weeks ago that the U.S. would be working with manufacturers here in the United States to donate 500 million doses, most of that through COVAX, and also rallied other G7 partners towards a goal of 1 billion doses. So I think we fully recognize the need for more doses to make COVAX viable. But as David said, in the near term, our support is really focused on those mitigation efforts and frankly, support for all of the health effects, not just COVID, but other infectious disease that people in Yemen face.
okay. Thanks. On the I think to add on the importance of Marib in Yemen.
Sure, thank you. I think it's a very important question. I mean, first of all, Marib is the stronghold of the Yemen government in northern Yemen. There's also an oil platform there. And as noted by myself and our other panelists, you have about 1 million IDPs. Marib over the years has become a refuge, a safe haven for Yemenis from all over the country who have fled other parts of the conflict and been able to remain safely there. All of that is under threat. The dream of a political process, Abbas, is that issues like control of Yemen's resources, what to do with IDPs and how to allow them to return home, and who controls the wealth of Yemen is decided not through the barrel of the gun, but through a political process that brings Yemenis together to make those decisions together. And I think we have to break the cycle, and this is central to my mission, break the cycle that any Yemeni group or outsider feels that the only way to attain progress is on the battlefield. And Marib is a point where we really have to, I think, change that particular type of behavior. So that's why I think there's so much attention by the international community, both on the political side, the humanitarian side, to get Marib out of that cycle of violence.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good explanation. I wanted to move the child soldier in Yemen. We had Dr. Rabia from the King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center about probably a couple of weeks ago. And he mentioned that the topic is importance for him and the center to tackle in Yemen. And we also know that women and children are the first victims of war. We also, David mentioned that you have over 2 million children malnutrition, suffering from malnutrition, and the rest of the children, probably most of them not going to school and being indoctrinated to go to war. I myself grew up in the civil war in Lebanon. I was a child, and I have a cousin that died at 16 as well in war. But we never chanted death to America. We never chanted death to Israel or damn to the Jews. But this indoctrination is happening in Yemen, and I think those are you're talking about the future of Yemen are these children. So, is there any is the aid or on the political side? Is there a chance? Is there a talk about making this an international crime, for example, and make sure hold the people that does that to accountable? And what on the humanitarian side, what are we doing basically to prevent them from being indoctrinated, help their families from not making that happen as we go along and conducted the other issues that had medical, economic, and protection as well. So that's open question to whoever wants to jump in. Thank you.
I'm happy to start, and then my colleagues, I'm sure, will have other points to make. But from a U.S. point of view, the use of child soldiers by any party is abhorrent and totally acceptable, and that's in any conflict. But certainly in Yemen, we've been very alarmed by the reports, more so on the Houthi side, of recruitment of child soldiers, particularly to go to the front in Marib. So that's another reason why the issues in Marib are so urgent. And these are issues that we raise, honestly, with both sides, that this is a repugnant practice. You talk about the ideological drift, Abbas, that you mentioned in Yemen. And I think that the more the warfare goes on, the more that Yemen's young people, the more that Yemen's next generation is influenced and impacted in a very negative way and comes to be influenced by the tendency to solve problems through warfare. And again, that's part of the cycle that I think we must break on an urgent basis.
Okay.
Us, Jean-Luc Anthony here. Tim, if you might comment on the role of Oman. You've been to the region some 7 times, I believe, since you appointed the president's special envoy. Oman prefers to be in the shadows as a facilitator, as a mediator, and it's been extraordinarily effective in other conflicts. How would you explain Oman's role in what you're trying to achieve?
Well, thank you, Jean-Luc. I think it's a very important question, because when we talk about building international consensus and support for a solution in Yemen, one absolutely must highlight the role, the very positive role that Oman is playing. Every single one of those trips, Jean-Luc, that I've taken, and sometimes with multiple stops, I have gone to Muscat, meeting with their leadership and their experts on Yemen. And I think the fact that the Sultan of Oman, who is relatively new on the throne there, is his support, his personal engagement on seeking a resolution of the Yemen conflict is something new and very special. And I think it's something that we certainly encourage. The Omanis, as you know, sent a delegation to Sana'a just 2 weeks ago. They spent a long time there. That was very much in coordination with us. We appreciated very much the engagements that they had with the Houthi leadership in Sana'a. And I think it just underscores the importance that regional actors, countries like Oman, can play. Oman's a bordering country on Yemen, so there's a huge stake in Oman for the outcome of the Yemen conflict. And I can't thank the Omani leadership enough for the kind of support and the kind of skin in the game, as we say in local parlance, that they are demonstrating on the Yemen conflict. It's going to be vital going forward.
Yes. Abbas, if I could ask another question to anyone, Sarah, David, or Tim. realistically speaking,
Dr. Anthony, because we're running out of time, but yes, please, go ahead.
Realistically, with the Houthis having so much more territory than they had when they began, also the amount of weaponry that fallen into their hands when they seized control of the government in Sana'a, and now the issues of oil and gas with Marib. How realistic is it to expect a party that has gained that much to give it up, to yield it for the sake of a ceasefire? How realistic is that as a prospect?
My experience from the Houthis, John Duke, is that they have spoken about a commitment toward peace in Yemen, and I think there's certainly elements within the leadership that favor that. And I think continued engagement with them from the Omanis, from other actors, from Saudi Arabia, from ourselves, is an essential piece. And I think we have to, continue to incentivize them. I've spoken on a number of occasions about the legitimacy of the Houthis, which is to say that the United States recognizes them as a legitimate actor. We recognize them as a group that has made significant gains. No one can wish them away or out of the conflict. So let's deal with the realities that exist on the ground and bring that international consensus and also the humanitarian prerogatives, which have been so eloquently described in this panel, to bear on the situation. And I hope encourage the Houthis to support the UN-led process and the efforts that are underway to support peace and a political transition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Dr. Anthony. I think we're exceeded our 1 hour. Perhaps any final comments, Tim or David? I know Sarah, she had to actually break away, but any final comments before we finish? Go ahead, David, but then Tim.
Well, yeah, maybe just there was a question raised on the child recruitment, just to say that we are working with the authorities in Sana'a to try to address that particular issue. And in fact, they reacted very violently this last week because they are still listed for child recruitment and maiming and killing of children. So they have, I think the thing I would say is there's two things that I think they're very sensitive to. One is the international perception of them as an entity being child killers actually hurts. And so there are leverage points in there that we can utilize in our advocacy. And the second is I think they've come to a recognition that didn't exist in the past, and last year was useful in that regard. The significant reduction of assistance coming in has caused some level of reflection in which they now understand nothing is automatic, and that they actually do need to cooperate with the UN and other partners on the ground, at least to some greater degree. So we're finding some openings that we can exploit with those sensitivities. So it's important to understand their mindset at this point in time if you want to find effective ways forward on these various issues. So I'll just finish with that, but as a couple of observations, back over.
Thank you. Just to close out from my side, it would be to really assure the audience and stress the point that the United States is in the pursuit of a peace track in Yemen in a big way, in a way that we haven't been for 6 years. And we're determined to see a positive result. And I think the Yemeni people can count on the United States to stay in it, stay with it. Lots of bumps on the road, but I think the commitment of the administration is there. Our heart is in the right place, and we really are committed to seeing a change for the better in Yemen on the political side, on the humanitarian side. And I hope the Yemeni people will take heart and continue to support this effort from inside the country as well. And thank you, Abbas, and to the organization, John Duke, for hosting me and our colleagues.
Thank you very much, Tim. Dr. Anthony, any final, can you close us, please?
Only to emphasize that the National Council has these kinds of events and programs and activities in pursuit of the National Council's mission, which is one word, namely education. A vision is to place the American relationship with our Arab friends, allies, strategic working partners on a firmer foundation than it is at present, than it has been, and is likely to be, unless enough good people on all sides work bilaterally, multilaterally to achieve that goal. We have had 3 individuals here who have provided hard to come by information, hard to come by insight, hard to come by knowledge, hard to come by understanding. And as a result, we have the tools now for a much deeper analysis of the issues, the challenges, the needs, the concerns of the Yemeni people and their role in this overall United States-Arab relationship. I think our specialists, we couldn't ask for 2 more relevant people with empirical knowledge of the situation and reality on the ground, not theoretical, not from the media, but from their own direct firsthand observation and experience. We thank you both, and thank you, Abbas, as moderator, and thank you, Al-Anjeri, for the Reconnaissance research, co-sharing of this educational seminar.